think we're actually going to start off by talking about cornhole.
Let's do it.
Do you like cornhole?
I've played cornhole, I guess, in my time. I would say I'm a pretty average, like Richard in this episode, an average student. I'm an average cornhole player, I guess you can say.
I've always known it as bags,
That's the thing. Yeah,
and I like to think I'm pretty good at bags.
Yeah.
I don't know. It is a good backyard game every now and again.
Yeah, it can get exciting, and it can lead to interesting relationships, as we see in this first episode.
That's right. Well, welcome to DTF St. Louis, the unofficial after show. We have seen our first episode of the HBO show DTF St. Louis. It's got a lot in there. We're going to dive into it.
Yeah, it's we're dealing with the potential love affair. We have, midlife crisis going on. We have a death in the first episode, and we got to figure out what happened. So this is, I'm always interested in how a show stick the landing with this pilot episode, and I think this kind of knocked it out of the park.
Well, in our podcast here, we're going to be talking, of course, about the show, kind of get our thoughts. We want to hear from you, too, so please feel free to reach out as you kind of are watching, engaging the show. We're St. Louisans, so we're kind of watching it from that perspective, but we're also just lovers of this story and wanted to see kind of where this is going to go and everything like that. But on this podcast, we're going to dive into some deeper issues, too, talk about some of the big picture things. On our show here, the F stands for facts.
Yes.
This is the show where F stands for facts. We won't be saying the F word. I have to kind of lay that as a caveat here. But really special, actually. We just talked with the show's creator, executive producer, writer, director, Stephen Conrad, and we're going to bring you more of that conversation in just a little bit. So that was a really, really fascinating conversation.
Very insightful. You can tell the passion there, the excitement about this show. We got a very interesting story that he shared with us that kind of leads into our weathermen in this show and where that was maybe inspired from. But yeah, it was a great conversation.
Yeah, so stick with us for that because you're going to want to hear that. He had a ton of stuff to say about St. Louis and about why he made this show too, and you mentioned some fun stories that he shared there. But we do want to give a spoiler alert.
Yes.
Because if you haven't seen the show, we obviously encourage you to go watch it first before watching this show. We don't want to ruin anything for you on episode 1, which is called Cornhole. And you'll see why as you watch the show. Sort of starts these characters off on a journey. But as a recap here, so we've met Floyd.
Yes.
He's a stepdad. We see he's trying pretty hard as a stepdad.
He's trying. That's all you can ask for sometimes, right? Where Richards is kind of very, arm's length and does it well. Not in the first scene here. It's very, very close and personal between the two. But yeah, he's at least trying. I can apply that for Floyd.
I feel like he's communicative. Like he is like trying to work through emotionally, but also there's some things you're like, okay, I know you're talking about. Are you talking about yourself, or are you talking about your son
your
here?
Personal life and your relationship with your wife and other friends, or lack of fulfillment from friendship. So it's a very interesting way to open up this episode that gives us some insight on where Floyd is mentally, and he's struggling to find connection.
And then we see Clark and Floyd meet for the first time in sort of such a interesting scenario of covering. I'm assuming it's a tornado. They call it a cyclone. In downtown St. Louis, and this stop sign nearly crashes right into Clark.
Which might be foreshadowing. The big red stop sign right in front of him. Like maybe you shouldn't indulge in this relationship because it might lead to your death.
I never thought of it that way. I sort of thought it was like, oh wow, okay, so this is just their meet cute. I guess how they become fast friends. Really,
it's a warning from the world. Maybe stay away from Clark Floyd, but unfortunately he doesn't.
I didn't even think about that. So that's very interesting. And then it is Clark that suggests, there's this app called DTF St. Louis where he even says happily married people can stray from said marriage. And Floyd is resistant at first.
He is. He seems, as you would hope, someone in a relationship would be kind of distant to indulging in this type of app. But as we see from Floyd in this episode, he is just looking for anything. And I don't even know if he's looking for that intimacy from another partner. I just think he wants to connect with someone, because as we see in this episode, him and Carol are just like, hi, bye. They're so disconnected at this point in their relationship. So I think he's honestly just like, hey, I'm lucky enough to have, Clark as a friend, and I'll go, if it's interesting to you, Clark, it's interesting to me, and I just think he's looking for fulfillment. Yeah,
and it's so interesting what he kind of identifies as the reason he's not feeling it with Carol, his wife, anymore, is her umpire gear.
That got the biggest laugh out of me in this first episode, especially the way they shot it, and her just doing just random stuff around the house in her uniform. That was hilarious to me.
Yeah.
That was so funny.
And on the flip side being, then he walks in with his comic book, and he's like so into that, and you just kind of go, okay.
Yeah. And listen, to be fair, I'm a Batman fan myself. Those comics can get very emotional, but as we can see, Carol, she doesn't care.
Yeah.
She doesn't care about it.
There's clearly this disconnect between them, and just, and I'm sure a lot of people can kind of relate to that to some degree after a certain number of years of marriage or just, divergent lives, kind of going sort of your separate ways.
And this is the beauty of this first episode. It makes you lean in. Like, what was it? At what point in the relationship did this distance become more apparent? When did Floyd kind of lose himself? He mentions a couple times his health. Is he in good shape? He wants to mentally be in good shape. And he mentions earlier in the episode he wants to do it for Richard because he wants to stay, along the ride for Richard to grow up. But it's a lot of external stuff. It's nothing internal. He doesn't seem motivated to do it for himself. It's for other people. So it's really interesting to kind of see that dynamic with Floyd. He really kind of stood out to me in this episode.
It's interesting, too, because I feel like we don't get some of that same backstory with Clark. We don't really, it's kind of a mystery. Like, one thing I noticed is that he and his wife, who's not a big character so far, they just high-five goodbye, which is such a, not a romantic way to say goodbye to your partner. We know he's a dad, obviously, as well, but we don't really know what his backstory or his motivations are. Yeah,
the only thing we know so far, as far as at least his unhappiness in his marriage, is his wife is doing something good with charity, but unfortunately with their, him waking up at 4 a.m, that's his excuse to explore this app because they're on two different, as he calls it, sexual paths. So their pathways are different at this point. So,
When he gives a little bit of ick, would you say sometimes? I mean, he's looking at the neighbor.
Yeah, creepy.
Yeah.
Creepy Clark.
Yeah.
Maybe call him CC, creepy Clark. Yeah.
That could definitely carry through. We'll see on how that goes. And then, of course, we know from the trailer what happens. And also halfway through this episode, we know Floyd is dead.
Yeah, I mean, that's, with HBO shows in particular, you either open the show with the death and you figure it out from there, or you end the show with the big bang, but they put it right in the middle. So we're kind of, as an audience, left with like, okay, where do we go from here? And exploring, we're assuming we're going to, flash back to see what led to that point to Floyd dying. But yeah, really interesting way to show a death in the middle of the episode to kind of throw the audience off and pick yourself up to trying to figure out where the rest of the show is headed.
Yeah, and then we're looking at the items on the ground. It's almost like we have to then become the detectives. Yeah, and there are some very specific items that...
Yeah. I didn't know Bloody Marys were in the can. New to me, but yeah.
And other things might have been in that can as well.
Yeah.
But yeah, so... there is some pages of a magazine that are there. They're going to start looking at this stuff. I want to take just a quick minute to play a clip from the show because I think it sets up one of our detectives very well, too. Take a listen.
Autopsy's going to say heart attack. 3 miles from home. Suburban dad with his secret gay pages. Should be able to be yourself in your house. Shouldn't have to get up so early just to be you. Should be an all day kind of a thing.
Okay, so tell me about these two detectives. What's your sort of like off the bat, okay, these two are unique?
So we have the special agent or crimes agent Plum and Detective Homer. One that Homer just seems to be very, almost like our characters, kind of content at a certain extent, where it's just like he chalks up the murder or the case to, he's just a regular suburban guy trying to have a private moment to himself, and he had a heart attack. Where Plum's like, well, no, look at the picture, look at the evidence that we have here. There's something to kind of explore more, which is almost like these characters are kind of representing this show in regards to, on surface level, we can just look at, there's an affair, there's some nefarious things that might have happened, case closed. But as Plum kind of alludes, there's more to the story that's going on. There's more underneath. So I like how these characters represent, almost in a weird way, kind of mirror our lead characters with Floyd and Clark, where they're looking at this in a very different perspective, and they're coming into this case with their own assumptions and coming with their own thoughts. And it's going to be really interesting to explore this kind of new school versus old school approach that we see within this dynamic. And Richard and Joey are just great in the role so far.
Amazing. And I really like the two of them together. Like there's some subtlety there in the way that they interact. I've never heard a detective, for example, say something like, I'm porn positive. I was like, oh, okay. That's, for her to right away reveal something about herself.
Her personal life,
Exactly. I mean, she just does not fit the mold of what we stereotypically see in a law enforcement officer.
And that could speak to, again, this kind of generational differences between the two, where you have Homer that's maybe more old school in his approach. He might not be as personable with sharing things like what you just mentioned with Pope, but she's like, hey, sometimes you got to bring in your personal touch to maybe fill in those dots and connect the things to figure out this case. I like the different approach of what they're going to come to with this case. And we see later on that even though Homer might be a little old school, he still has his methods to get answers from the text messages that we see. So I'm really intrigued to see how this dynamic works between what each of them bring to the table.
It's funny to see Clark get arrested on live TV. Hopefully that never happens to any other TV weatherman in real life. That's obviously fiction. It's funny, some of the components of like TV news that they're playing up, the billboards and his sort of, even the theme music in the beginning and his warm-up moves and, all that stuff is authentic feeling. And then, of course, the St. Louis aspects of it, too. Are you seeing St. Louis in this show? What do you think you're seeing so far of our town?
It's so tough when you're watching a movie or a show that's taking place in your hometown, because you're obviously, the eagle-eyed people like ourselves are like, oh, that's not, that doesn't belong there, or, this, that, and the other. But I think the show does a good enough job to almost as the show, we have characters pretending to be certain ways. The show does a pretty good job of pretending to adapt the St. Louis area, even with the fictional names of where they are or whatnot. But I think it does an okay job of giving the impersonation of we're in the Midwest in St. Louis.
Yeah, it's kind of more suburbia.
Yeah.
And suburban life and maybe what we think about suburban life and things like that. But there's this fictional town of Twyla. We don't have a Twyla here.
Right.
But it's just kind of cool, though, to see the St. Louis County Sheriff's Department working on this. And, at one point I did catch a Bud Light can, which is the Anheuser-Busch brewery. There's St. Louis in the show.
Right.
They're working it in.
Working out, there's the arch in the background, things of that nature,
Yeah.
You can see that it's giving the impersonation of the St. Louis area, which you can appreciate that.
Yeah, but we don't need it to necessarily be a central character. I mean, sometimes it's like, it's the location, we got it. We don't need it to be like in our faces.
I think the ideas of what they're playing with, again, the suburban lifestyle, you think one thing of what people that live in these places might be, but there's something more to it. So, yeah.
And show creator Stephen Conrad spoke to us a lot about that.
Yeah.
And about it not being filmed in St. Louis. Had some really interesting things to say about TV Weatherman also. So now's a good time maybe to take a listen to that conversation.
Yes.
I'm Lauren Traeger, and this is Elliot Collins, and we're with First Alert 4 in St. Louis.
Hi, I'm Steve. Don't kill me because we didn't shoot in St. Louis. It's impossible.
We promise we won't. We're just grateful to be thought about. So thank you for that.
Yeah. Well, thanks for your time today.
Thank you for joining us.
So, to jump right into it, Steve, can you tell us a little bit? This show is like right up our wheelhouse, right? We have a love triangle. We have these characters dealing with midlife crisis. We have a death coming pretty early in the show. Can you tell us a little bit about what sparked your idea? Did the death lead you into the story, the characters, the midlife crisis they're going through? Like, what was the thing that kind of was your entry point into the story?
Well, I work with a pretty small group of other filmmakers, and this is our third series together. And we've primarily been making suspense and, learning as you go, caring about that genre a lot, feeling like one of the interesting things that streaming has allowed filmmakers to accept the challenge that can you keep suspense building? Can you use the dynamics of that genre over compounds of hours? Like, what's that challenge like? If you had an occasion to rise to, what could that be like? So starting with suspense and then immediately looking around and going, who are my partners today? Who am I making a television show with? Like, David and I were fishing around for something, starting to scratch the surface of some suspense ideas. Getting to know David and David's potency. Going, okay, here's I could build. I'm getting to know what, like, his charm, his particular charm, his particular electricity and attraction to an audience's eyes. It's really pretty extraordinary. I had made this comparison, which probably makes no sense to anybody, but called him a really sexual, sexy Gene Wilder. Like, he can hold the whole thing down by himself. It wouldn't be a leading man you'd draw, but there's this beauty and sexiness to him. And I thought, okay, he's an age I recognize, And I know what you contend with when you get to be in that phase of life, what your challenges are, where the conflict is. I thought, how do David and I make suspense? What could happen to him? I live in the Midwest. I live in Chicago. That, and then I travel all over the world. And I've recognized that people make these assumptions about me because I'm from the Midwest. They mistakenly think that my appetites are sedate and that my capacity to be unusual or wild is lesser than. And I can tell you for certain that it's not true of Chicago. And I've spent enough time in St. Louis to know that this theme that we share about St. Louis, that the detectives arrive at, it's this line, no one's normal, it just looks that way from across the street. That you could say that about Chicago, that people can make assumptions about how peaceful and tranquil our emotional lives are, just because we haven't chosen to move to LA to get over in the movie business or to go to New York to become a titan of industry. They're wrong. Like every mistake you can make in St. Louis. Like every bad decision that awaits you in St. Louis, the same way it does in Chicago and elsewhere. So in terms of its suspense, I thought, why don't we place it in an environment that makes you make assumptions, photograph a quality of the world where we start with cornhole and say, how does cornhole lead to murder? It has in real life. You know it. You just know it has. So, but that seemed invitational to me, to an audience, to say this is suspense as you know it in a world that you don't quite know as well. So using the assumptions people make about the Midwest to then subvert and dig deeper into was available to me, and I understand them because I've been living in the middle of America since I was 18, and it's where my life is, where my family is, it's where my mistakes were, it's where all my hopes and aspirations live. So that DTF Chicago just didn't sound as good as DTF St. Louis. It missed by this much. So I just sort of poured myself into the St. Louis version of it. But I'm taking more time than you had. There has to be an industry that can support like 80 days. There has to be stages and camera houses and prop houses. And we looked, and the show would have suffered immensely if we tried to go without those things. St. Louis would have come off poorly if we didn't have the tools that I feel are necessary to make this world recognizable and beautiful. So I hope you'll forgive me.
But how do you then try to weave in little moments to make it feel authentic for people, who are going to be watching it saying, well, I see the Bud Light there. I see the references.
The details, I hope, add up that way. Well, Cornhole, for example, earlier this morning we did a round of European press, and they'd never heard of it. And I'm faced with you can't explain cornhole. Why would anybody why did you call it that? Why does anybody want to play that? Those details, and having lives where the big man on campus is the weatherman, and Clark has something over Carol and David because the metrics of his economy make him someone who can change their lives, right? Having Carol work essentially in a secretarial position, even though it's not called that these days, with a real limit on the ceiling of her economy, with a husband who is essentially doing sign language and not meeting her in terms of bringing an income in, having a life then that means that you will always have to sacrifice. That is a really recognizable feature of life in the Midwest to me, that you shake hands with the terms of your life and you say, this is where we are and this is probably where we're going to stay unless something drastic happens. I think people will recognize that economic plight. There's a big cityness to St. Louis too, where the sheriff just knows better? Because I mean, there are more murders in St. Louis than there are in Chicago, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Per capita. Yeah.
He's busy. The suburban thing he doesn't really understand. 15 miles out is a brand new world for him. So we try to respect the urban reality of problem solving through violence there, and how recognizable that is to the sheriff. What surprises him are the terms under which someone might commit a murder to gain something that surprises him. Is this possible? Are these people capable of this? Of course they are. They're desperate in their own ways. They're desperate. Desperation leads to terrible decisions. But he's going to generationally be surprised that sexuality has changed on planet Earth since he was a sexual person. Anyway, that's what St. Louis had to offer me, which essentially is everything. Being able to fool around with people thinking they know what's going on there and being wrong, the same way the sheriff might be wrong about what his apprehension for what's going on.
And I know we want to talk a little more about the cast, but quickly on TV weathermen, what intrigues you about TV weathermen?
I grew up in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, and there was a weatherman. What was this guy's name? Oh, he had a fake name. Al Sunshine. His name was Al Sunshine, and he would do the weather. And I didn't like that as a kid. I just knew that wasn't his name. And my friends and I drove by him one day, and he was doing a remote broadcast from the beach. And I decided to throw my Arby's Black Cow milkshake at him while he was doing a broadcast. And I didn't think I would hit him because he was so far away. And I did. But as I grew up, I'm like, why? What compelled you? The idea was mine. Nobody encouraged me to do it. I didn't like something about him that I thought was just not genuine. The relationship, the dishonest job, and I don't mean St. Louis weathermen.
Yeah, I know.
It's I'm going to be in your household, and I'm a part of your family, and I'm going to tell you it's time to put your coat on. I just don't like that. The over investment in you like me, right? Like, aren't you happy to have me be a part of your family? So I wanted a person who had that superficiality in their job in the way that he did it. Meteorologists are important, and I'm not disrespecting weathermen. This weatherman isn't a meteorologist. He reads the printout, and his job doesn't give him satisfaction, except he's sort of overpaid. And he is in stark contrast to David Harbour's character, who's underpaid for performing a really wonderful and necessary service, providing sign language to the deaf. This guy's making too much for doing too little. This guy's making too little for doing too much. They kind of each need what the other one has. So that's my fascination with weathermen. And I'm wrong the same way you're wrong about whatever subject you make assumptions about.
It's interesting because sunshine seems to be a thread through there. So.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that guy made an impression on me. I hope he's not still, I don't hope he's dead, but I hope he's not watching this.
Well, we're very grateful for your time so much.
Thank
Any
you very
final
much.
thoughts for our viewers or anything else? Any final thoughts?
Oh, I mean, just allow for St. Louis to sometimes look like Atlanta, please. And it's all I could do to keep the show set there. And the Midwest is something that I care about. And if you care about it too, I hope that you come to respect the way we handle the way people think we are and are wrong about.
Well, we are so grateful for your time and for this show. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
So again, so cool that he made the time to talk with us, and I just thought that was so interesting. Obviously, the milkshake incident has really stuck with him over time, but it's this idea of breaking down assumptions. Sometimes what we think we know about a place or people, we may not really know anything.
Yeah, that milkshake story was definitely a highlight for me, because it does seem like it was something that was a point of his life that stuck with him, and kind of speaks to the idea of Clark. Again, you might not know who these people are, or they're in the case of this show, he's almost like a local superstar in a certain light. So yeah, it was a very great conversation, great story with the weatherman there. But yeah, you can tell Steve the passion, the excitement, the creative endeavors that he brought to the show is all in the forefront. It's a really good conversation.
It seems like he really sort of, in a way, crafted a lot of this around David Harbour.
Yes, yeah.
And, that he had this idea and this vision for where that character is going to take us on this journey.
And David Harbour, as we've seen with this show so far and other works, he's a phenomenal actor. And you just, I feel bad for Floyd. He's the character right now that I'm really latched onto. We obviously know his fate, but how did he get there? We'll have to find out.
Yeah, I think he's very likable.
Yeah.
But it also makes you wonder in a show like this. We know it's a dark comedy, and some of the comedy is just so. I mean, I have actually laughed out loud in several places, but you kind of wonder, where is it going to go?
I mean, right now we're left with the idea of what happened to Floyd, right? Right now we're assuming that someone, as we find out, put a lethal dose of drugs in his Bloody Mary can. But the question is, who? Was it his young son or stepson? To make sure I say stepson, because Rich was very particular about that. But was it a stepson? Was it Carol? Was it, of course, Clark? Sometimes the best shows, the answers are right in front of us. Sometimes it might be someone we haven't met yet, because we know that he did get involved with an app. So maybe he met someone on the app that was a killer. So, we got to figure out where that's going. But wherever the story, that reveal may be, I'm just excited to go along on the ride based on this first episode.
And just thinking about a couple other St. Louis little angles, Kevin Klein pool, the community pool where he's found dead. Kevin Klein is from St. Louis, born here. Even that Purina is mentioned. That's a local company. They did weave in some St. Louis ideas in there. But yeah, I'm also just kind of wondering, we know, even from the conversation with Stephen Conrad and the way that his brain is kind of likes to kind of mull on these different topics, I bet it's going to twist and turn.
So far, we're in for a good ride. I'm someone that's a firm believer. If you can stick the landing on having your audience lean in, having the curiosity around who these characters are, what led to them to certain decisions, I'm down for this ride. I'm down for this ride is whatever acronym you want to use there. So yeah.
Well, and we are so excited to be doing this podcast together. It's always great to talk to you. And we are, again, as we go on this journey together, we are getting down to the facts. We want to talk about some of these issues. So on next week's episode, we are talking with a relationship and sex therapist, because part of the theme certainly is what happens for people in midlife, where maybe they decide to take some left or right turns away from what they might normally be doing, sometimes with significant consequences, sometimes with not. So we're going to be talking with her about maybe some real takeaways from the show for relationships. Obviously, this is fiction, and a totally different scenario. But we hope we're going to learn some things on this show too, and maybe have some good conversations. Part of that, of course, is we want to hear from people.
Yes.
So please reach out to us. How can they find you, Elliot?
So I am on mostly all the social media accounts, whether it's TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, or what have you, at simply just Movie Files. So if you guys want to hear more of my takes on movies and shows we love to talk about, check me out.
All right. And I'm at Lauren Traeger Reports on Instagram and TikTok. And you can also just shoot us an email. It's dtfstl@firstalert4.com. So we'll put that up on the screen too so people can find us. But also, if you want to be a guest on the show, if there's any big St. Louis names out there, or we're still hoping for Jason Bateman to just give us a call, David Harbour, you are always welcome on this show. Joyce Sunday, anybody. We'd love to have more conversations. That's what this is all about, dialoguing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much for being here with us, and we'll see you for the next episode. Episode 2 of DTF St. Louis is coming up on Sunday.